The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. Today we're going to be talking about how rich people form class solidarity.
Take a look around you and find someone you don't know. Maybe somebody who doesn't look kind of like you. Are you willing to fight for that person as much as you're willing to fight for yourself?
He was speaking to something desperately lacking in the capitalist world that we live in. Solidarity. Solidarity is incredibly important, and it's something that the left does not take seriously enough, even though the left is the only one explicitly talking about it. So let's talk about why that is and how we can fix it. Ellen DeGeneres, an old softball buddy of mine, recently went to a football game with George W. Bush, an old Yale buddy of mine. Many people were angry that a celebrity who claims the mantle of being a major LGBT representative would be so friendly with someone who made a strong push to ban gay marriage while he was president.
Today, I want to explain why I support the Marriage Protection Amendment and why I'm urging Congress to pass it and send it to the states for ratification.
Not to mention killed 500,000 to 1 million Iraqis in cold blood and set climate and environmental policy back so far we may never recover as a species. In response to the outrage, Ellen released a video defending her friendship with Bush by saying,
I'm friends with George Bush. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of people who don't share the same beliefs that I have. We're all different, and I think that we've forgotten that that's okay, that we're all different.
Hey, we disagree about some issues, but we should all be able to be civil and friendly with those that we disagree with. Many rich celebrities, like me, responded to Ellen's video with messages of what? Solidarity. Lots and lots and lots of solidarity. As a lot of leftists pointed out, this let's all get along civility scolding is really just a mask to cover up a lot of class solidarity among the rich. Rich liberals, after all, aren't very civil toward poor people. But rich liberals keep telling us that in order to live in a good society, we have to be polite to people who want to keep oppressing us and murdering us. This belief is integral to their class solidarity. And the rich have a lot of class solidarity. Do you?
And that is the central tenet of what's wrong right now. That's what's wrong with Chris Matthews. That's what's wrong with the other pundits, the millionaire pundits who wish they could be billionaire pundits. They have class solidarity. They're banding together in their op-eds to fight Bernie Sanders and to fight his supporters. Now, we may have some serious disagreements with Tucker Carlson. Class solidarity isn't one of them. He gets class solidarity. He understands what's happening with the ruling class versus working class people. The story of American decline is the story of an incompetent ruling class. You'll hear many self-serving explanations for it, but the truth is it's that simple. The people in charge inherited an industrial superpower with unchallenged military dominance. In a little more than a generation, they squandered all of it. In exchange for short-term profits, bigger vacation homes, and cheaper household help, they wrecked what they did not build. They outsourced entire sectors of our economy to China. They imported a serf class to drive down wages, and they crippled the middle class while doing it. Side note, Tucker, importing the serf class to drive down wages will not drive down wages if we make sure that there's a floor under the bottom of those wages. As late as 2007, Bernie Sanders said things similar to what you just said, but then he figured out how to put a floor under the wages in the form of $15 an hour minimum wage for everyone. Back to Tucker. How people so awful wound up in charge of a nation as great as ours is a question historians will have to answer, and they will someday. But at this point, it's clear the population has grown tired of it. Donald Trump's election is one clear sign of that. The rise of Bernie Sanders is another. The ruling class, in other words, is losing its grip on power, and the ruling class members can feel it. They can smell it. It terrifies them. Isn't that what Agent Smith said to Morpheus? That he could smell the humans and he was tired of their smell?
Can you hear me, Morpheus? I'm going to be honest with you. I hate this place, this zoo, this prison, this reality, whatever you want to call it. I can't stand it any longer. It's the smell, if there is such a thing. I feel saturated by it.
Their first response was denial. It always is. They retreated into fantasy. They wondered, why can't we be just like Joe Biden and make it 2009 again? Well, that didn't work, and when it didn't, they reverted to their governing instinct, which is authoritarianism. They stopped trying to convince the public of anything and instead decided to scare them. Fearful people are easier to control. You saw it on the front page of their newspaper Friday morning, the New York Times. Lawmakers are warning that Russia is meddling to re-elect Trump, read the headline. Inside the story there was nothing. No evidence, no detail, not even a coherent set of accusations. But it was enough to alert the morons on cable news. It was time to do their job, which is now and always to run interference for the people in charge. Now remember, most of the people on television have no idea what they're saying, even as they're saying it. On MSNBC, host Chris Matthews said, "It's official. Russia has endorsed the re-election of President Donald Trump, who is trying desperately right now to keep that matter secret." Also on MSNBC, former CIA Chief of Staff Jeremy Bash said, "If the Russians are attacking our election processes and they're doing so to benefit Donald Trump, I think, frankly, the president welcomes it. He wants it." On CNN, host Don Lemon said, "So as bad as it is, the Russians are back at it, trying to help Trump get reelected. It's far worse that the President of the United States he is trying to cover it up." On MSNBC, host Lawrence O'Donnell said, "The President is a Russian operative. That sounds like the description of a bad Hollywood screenplay, but it is real, and it is Vladimir Putin's greatest achievement. This is one of those shocking news days if you retain the capacity to be shocked in the Trump era by the Trump regime, which might be better labeled the Trump-Putin regime." So these people claim the President of the United States has colluded with Russian President Vladimir Putin to steal an election. No, not just the last one, but the next one too. Be afraid, says Don Lemon. Be very afraid. Yet the public doesn't seem especially afraid. Maybe they've heard it before somewhere. Their lack of panic is deeply distressing to the Democratic Party, which is counting on another Red Scare sometime between now and November. So Brian Williams, trustworthy Brian Williams, stepped in to scold America for not being more terrified. Williams said on his show on MSNBC, "We begin tonight with sad word that funeral services are pending this evening after the death of Outrage earlier today. Outrage officially died of exhaustion, though buoyed at the very end by the one bright spot, the realization that its close relative, apathy, survives and is thriving." Got that? They are saying, "Screw you, America. You ought to be falling for it a second time. How dare you?" You can see the frustration on their faces. On the other hand, you think they might take the time to come up with a new hoax occasionally. Why can't they invent Argentine sappers once in a while, or saboteurs from Malawi? Something new and interesting. But no, like a robot vacuum cleaner stuck carving circles under a chair, they are going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over until the batteries run out. And now they're trying it on Bernie Sanders. New York Times reporter Peter Baker said on MSNBC, where he is an analyst, "Now you might ask the question, as some people have, would they want Trump over Bernie Sanders? Sanders, of course, a democratic socialist, is, more ideologically in tune with old Russia anyway. And remember, of course, the Russians did favor Bernie Sanders in the primary in 2016 over Hillary Clinton." Wait, Bernie Sanders? He is a Putin stooge too? We thought he was a Brezhnev stooge. Whatever. He's colluding with the Russians. He's got to be, because he's not with the program. That's a good insight, Tucker. That's why they're accusing people of being Russian stooges, because they're not with the program. I'll also interject here. Say what you like about Donald Trump. This idea that he's a Russian stooge is just silly. You've been drinking the MSDNC Kool-Aid for too long if you buy into that. And if you go to our friends in the gray zone, Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal, you'll see right away that it is all a big bunch of Dickie McGee's acts. Now back to Tucker. Just this afternoon, the Washington Post reported Bernie Sanders was briefed by U.S. officials, intel officials, that Russia is trying to help his presidential campaign. Now, that happened weeks ago. He learned about it weeks ago, but the Sanders campaign never leaked the story. Now, on the eve of the Nevada caucuses, someone in the so-called intelligence community did leak it, just as they repeatedly leaked selective information in the first Russia hoax in an effort, of course, to derail Donald Trump, whose policies they disagree with. So the CIA is leaking this story on the eve of Nevada caucuses. Sort of sounds like someone is meddling in U.S. elections, doesn't it? And it's not Russia. You see what's going on here? Yes, you do. Our democratic system is in fact under attack. That much is true. But it's not the Russians who are attacking it. It's not even the Chinese. It's being attacked by our own ruling class. They're undermining democracy because they have no choice. If they left it up to voters to decide where to go next, they'd be out of a job tomorrow because they've been terrible stewards of this country. Some of them would be in jail. So they've got to subvert our system. Their livelihoods depend on it. All right, so thank you, Tucker, for that insight. Most of it is right on the money. I'll insert a word here about Chris Matthews. Chris Matthews is not going to be starving anytime soon. He's got plenty of money laid away. What Chris Matthews is upset about is that he won't have invitations to nice parties anymore. He won't have people hanging on his every word. He will no longer be in the In Club in Washington, D.C., and he hates it. He can't fathom it. And so he's fighting tooth and toenail to attack Bernie. And Chris Matthews is just the tip of the iceberg. Look how many op-eds there are if you have time. Look how many pundits of his ilk are trashing Bernie Sanders and trying to get us to be more reasonable. I don't know why Chris and the others think that we should be outraged because the rich aren't able to subvert us anymore, but hey, whatever floats your boat. So now moving to Anand Giridharadas, he's on MSNBC, and his ideas here, and the commentator on MSNBC, are pretty good.
Great, and good to see you. I'm going to read a little bit of You to You. You wrote this in the New York Times. There was never a way for Mr. Bloomberg to run as anything but Mr. Billionaire. The pitch he landed on was incorruptibility. I will be the only candidate in this race who isn't corruptible. Mr. Bloomberg told an audience in Phoenix last November, who isn't going to take a penny from anyone and who will work for $1 a year. This was the best he could do. Suggest that being a billionaire will make him more honest because billionaires are so rich they don't have to listen to other billionaires. That sounds like the argument Donald Trump made, and look what we got now. But let me let you elaborate.
You know, I think, thinking about last night and this being the morning after Nevada, the Michael Bloomberg phenomenon is the explanation and a way of explaining the Bernie Sanders phenomenon for all these people who don't still understand. The fact that we are in what I call this billionaire referendum, where you have to take a stand on extreme wealth and in a democracy in order to be a conscious voter. Last night was a historic win that I think a lot of us are still struggling to understand. It is historic not just because you now have 3 victories in a row. It's not historic only because Bernie Sanders is now decisively proving that he can win in milk-white America and in the emerging superpower of color that we are becoming in the coming decades. But I really would argue that it is historic because we are starting to see that we may be paddling through a bend in the river of history here. Something is happening in America right now that actually does not fit our mental models. It certainly doesn't fit the mental models of a lot of people on TV. It doesn't fit the mental models of a lot of people in the parties. It doesn't fit our cultural mental models. You have someone talking about, in a way we have not heard, genuine, deeper democracy, popular movements, human equality in a meaningful way, and a politics of love in the tradition of Dr. King, and winning elections in America, the United States of America. And I just have to say, and I've been encouraged watching you on air talk about your own rethinking of things, which I think we all have to do to be in this work. You know, I think this is a wake-up moment for the American power establishment. From Michael Bloomberg to those of us in the media, to the Democratic Party, to donors, to CEOs, many in this establishment are behaving, in my view, as they face the prospect of a Bernie Sanders nomination, like out-of-touch aristocrats in a dying aristocracy. Just sort of.
What he should say, what I will say for him here, is that the Republicans and the Democrats are two parties, and the third party is the punditry. And that he is holding himself accountable, and he's about to hold Chris Matthews accountable. And it is a powerful third party that nobody talks about that way. And I think that if you listen to what he's about to say, you'll understand it better if you think about the punditry as a third political party. They have that kind of influence over most Americans, not this American, and not viewers of the Bernie or Buzz show, but they do have a powerful influence over most Americans, especially the older Americans who could in good conscience support a Joe Biden or a Pete Buttigieg or an Elizabeth Warren, and certainly a Mayor Bloomberg.
Sort of, how do we stop this? How do we block this? And there is no curiosity. Why is this happening? What is going on in the lives of my fellow citizens in this country? They may be voting for something that I find it so hard to understand. What is happening? What is happening? This is a moment for curiosity in America. And I think about this network, which I love, which you love, and I think we have to look within also. Why is a lobbyist for Uber and Mark Zuckerberg on the air many nights explaining a political revolution to us? Why is Chris Matthews on this air talking about the victory of Bernie Sanders, who had kin murdered in the Holocaust, and analogizing it to the Nazi conquest of France? The people who are stuck in
I don't know if you heard about that, but that was a pretty big deal. I think we should all call for Chris Matthews to be fired. He should be. His head should roll over that.
An old way of thinking in 20th century frameworks, in gulag thinking, are missing what is going on. It is time for all of us to step up, rethink, and understand the dawn of what may be, frankly, a new era in American life.
Well, you know, and I don't know who the lobbyist is, but I will defend my friend Chris Matthews that I don't think that he was trying to make it a sort of, you know, anti-Jewish sort of, disparagement of Mr. Sanders. I think that what Chris, who I've known for a long time, I think what he's speaking to is that there is like a cultural revulsion to the idea of socialism among people of Chris's generation. You know, I hear it a lot, and it's interesting to me that for a lot of people, it's reflexive. It's you know, they grew up with the anti-USSR, you know, conditioning of this country post-World War II. That is who we always were. Even myself as a Gen Xer, we grew up doing the drills. I grew up in Colorado where we were 50 feet from ground zero and told we will be nuked if Russia, you know, bombed us. So I think you know that in America, people merge communism and socialism into sort of one big bad other. And so I wouldn't, you know, go there with Chris. But I will say this. I think that one of the biggest tricks, one of the greatest tricks ever pulled on the world is for really rich people to convince the world that just being really rich made you superior to other people and got everyone to buy it, right? They got poor people to buy it. You know, Donald Trump is only known because people thought he was rich. They weren't even sure he was rich. He didn't even confirm he was rich. But all he had to do was seem rich, and he could get to host a TV show. We had a thing called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous when I was growing up. People eagerly watched other rich people just live their lives in their homes and thought that was amazing. We have Real Housewives, and we watch people we perceive as rich walking around. Rich people have managed to do that, and while we're all watching them entertain us, they are taking the courts. They've taken Citizens United. They've taken our politics. They've taken this country. Donald Trump isn't out there helping working class people. He's making them broke while they are worshiping rich people who are getting rich. And so it is a trick. And I wonder if you think that maybe the Bloomberg on the one end of the spectrum and Bernie on the other is a sign that the spell is broken. That maybe people are like, hold on a second. Rich people aren't giving me anything. You know, and then even Donald Trump saying, I'll give you racism. I'll give may be racism, it isn't working anymore.
That's so well put. I will tell you this. When I wrote Winners Take All, which you showed, the heart of the book, my editor once asked me, what is this book about in one word? And I was like, this is a book about moves. This is a book about the dance moves that rich people pull off, the twirls and dives they pull off to make us think they are saving us. They are our saviors. From the very problems they are still working hard to cause, right? So to take a couple of your...
I grew up with that idea that Ronald Reagan was helping the job creators and we should all worship the job creators because, hey, we need jobs. And what we really have is masters. We have people trying to screw us out of our productivity. I keep talking about the Bureau of Labor Statistics that show that in 1950, we made roughly 400% less in productivity than we produce now. But our wages are flat. So now we make 4 times more than we did in 1950. Do we have 4 times more salary? Do we have a fourth of our working hours to work? And the answer is no. Where did all that money go? To these vaunted job creators, these vaunted assholes.
Or a couple of those moves. One is I make problems. Right? As I'm Michael Bloomberg, I make my entire fortune selling terminals and technology to the financial sector, which is the industry that has done the most to destroy opportunity in America for regular people. And then I have the gall to turn around and rich-splain myself as the savior to the problem I'm still profiting from causing. Another move is this kind of intelligence thing, like this idea that being rich gives you general purpose intelligence, that if you succeed at creating a social network because you're too socially awkward to meet girls in person, you are now an authority on public school education. You should be in charge of rethinking that. That's another move. But in this election, you are actually seeing, and you're completely right about the spell breaking. This is not about particular candidates. This is actually not about Bernie. This is not about Michael Bloomberg. This is about 40 years of a neoliberal paradigm maybe breaking, maybe shattering, maybe people waking up to it. And a lot of us in the media are the last to know. I have been on the trail and seen all these white guys in camo, as I've described before on this network, in the middle of a Bernie Sanders rally who do not look like socialists. And I verify, in fact, are you a socialist? Nope, not a socialist. Hate those socialists. Why are you at this rally? Because Bernie's fighting for me. There is something happening in this country where people are actually not fooled by the idea that Joseph McCarthy was trying to kind of worry us about. They don't think this is going to be the next domino to fall in the Cold War, in part because the Cold War is over. And they realize that what democratic socialism means, which is actually really social democracy, is just America joining the rest of the advanced world to make sure regular people are not dying on the street of the flu, are getting a decent education to flourish, and are living the kind of life we think we are living in a country where we say we have the American dream.
Yeah, I mean, the last people maybe who will find out will be the Trump voter, who will maybe eventually figure out that all they're getting are baubles too, and that there's nothing in it for them. They're not going to get anything. They may be the last to find out. People of color are usually the first to find out because we've always been told you ain't getting nothing, but we're saying now, now that we have equality, that's not a mask that you can really even hand to white people where they're like, at least I get better citizenship. Well, now you get nothing. And I think I agree with you. I think there is something happening where people are waking up to the fact that rich folks.
And then it just stops. So that was excellent. What we've got is people waking up. The spell is broken, or breaking at least, and people like Chris Matthews hate it. And so they're trying to use Russia to outrage us, and our outrage is broken. So they're splaining to us that we need to be more outraged about Russia, about McCarthyism, and it's not working. And they don't know what else to throw at us. But you can bet that when they try to take it away from Bernie at the convention, they're going to use red scaring to do it. When she defended her friend, Chris Matthews, and said he's just from a different era, I think she needs to understand that he is part of the oligarchy. He wants to defend the privilege of the oligarchs from the masses of people. And he doesn't like it when working class people wake up and figure out that the rich people are screwing us over, and red baiting won't help, racism won't help, all of the ways they use to divide us and conquer us aren't working anymore, and we're going to run them the fuck over. We'll either do it in the streets with signs, we'll do it by denying our labor, or for you dear viewers of this show and listeners to this podcast, we may use Bernie or bust to run them the fuck over. I had an interesting debate yesterday. It's on Twitch. I'll link to it below. And the debate was Bernie or bust versus vote blue no matter who. And it was clear to me that the people who were voting blue no matter who, the people who are advocates of that strategy, were apologists for people like Chris Matthews, who are apologists for people like Michael Bloomberg, who are apologists for people like the Rothschild family and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the hedge fund managers and on and on. The few wealthy people who own us all have a distinct hierarchy of favor, and they show favor to the people directly beneath them who show favor to the people beneath them, and it's all a big control network to keep working class people doing their fucking jobs and not complaining about it. That's Chris Matthews' problem. It isn't about Russia, it's about class struggle, and he doesn't want the United States to wake up as the rest of the world seems to be waking up with regard to the perils of neoliberalism, with regard to the injustice of neoliberalism. He doesn't want us to understand what's being done to us, what has been done to us for at least 40 years under neoliberalism. Chris Matthews has benefited a lot from neoliberalism. The people who benefit the most are these reasonable people who keep op-edding us into oblivion, telling us that we working class people need to just take it. We need to stop complaining. We need to stop being mean to them on Twitter. And we just need to take it. And we're done taking it. Here's a tweet from Ryan Knight. He says, a lot of centrist Democrats actually think Bernie is the reason we lost in 2016. They're wrong. We lost because our party did not have a progressive agenda for working people, and we will lose again if we don't have a progressive agenda for working people. And he's talking about the Democrat Party like it's our party. A lot of us don't think of the Democratic Party as our party. And that's where the people will really wake up and stomp all over the bourgeoisie. Working class people who are not affiliated with either party are the most awake, I think. And they're not going to vote blue no matter who because some Democrat tells them to. They don't even think of themselves as Democrats. They don't trust Democrats. They're not in that party. So you can't tell them, you can't tell us what to do. Vote blue no matter who is for party loyalists. And independents, that's not us. Alan Hoffa says, completely agree. We didn't give people something to vote for in 2016. Instead, we told them not to vote for Trump. People want a positive and clear vision, and they want a leader who has unwavering commitment to that vision. Since we're talking about Chris Matthews, we might as well also talk about Rahm Emanuel, who says Bernie Sanders is stoppable. This is a piece from The Hill by Justine Coleman. Former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel said Sunday that although Senator Bernie Sanders is the frontrunner in the 2020 Democratic presidential race, he is stoppable. Emanuel told ABC's This Week that the Vermont progressive could falter if moderate voters coalesce around a candidate instead of spreading their votes among former Vice President Joe Biden, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, and Senator Amy Klobuchar. But I would say this, the moderates need to coalesce around one person, he said. If you have a divided field, we've seen this play out in the Republican primary in 2016. If there is not a kind of singular mano to mano, then he's going to get the delegate primary. Another oligarchic suck-up, ABC host George Stephanopoulos, pointed out that there's no indication any of these centrist candidates will drop out soon. Emanuel, who served as former President Barack Obama's White House chief of staff, responded saying every candidate still has a thread of logic of why they should stay. And as long as that happens, he will continue to have 45%, the former mayor said, referring to Sanders. He also called attention to Sanders' strategy, saying it upends every electoral map used by Democrats in the past couple of decades. It's a different theory of the case, never been tested before nationally and never been proven successful for any Democrat, either presidential or congressional majority, he added. What he's talking about is that Bernie doesn't care if he has traditional Democrats in the fold because he's trying to run the table by inspiring people who don't traditionally vote. He's trying to wake up all of the people who have been disenfranchised by the system and saying, look, maybe we can overhaul the system. Maybe we can blow it up. Maybe we can have a real revolution. That's what Rahm is saying that Sanders is doing that's untried, and he's right. We're going to unite the workers in ways that have never been done before. Sanders has had a successful start to the primary season. Yup. Grabbing wins in Nevada and New Hampshire, and second place, not second place, he won the popular vote in Iowa. He's got 3 big wins under his belt. So there. The senator currently retains 31 delegates, although 26 delegates have not yet been distributed after the Nevada caucuses Saturday. The moderate candidates have been awarded a combined 35 delegates. So Bernie has 31, everyone else has 35. If we could get that flipped around, we can give Bernie a clear majority going into the convention in Milwaukee. As I've said before, Bernie or bust is the way to achieve that. We need to scare the comfortable Democrats into scaring the elitist DNC machinery into giving Bernie the nomination. And unless they're really scared, I don't think they're going to do it. So if we can scare the comfortable Democrats into voting for Bernie in the primaries without waiting to vote for him afterwards if they don't get their preferred candidate in the primaries, I think we've got this locked up. If we don't scare the people who typically vote in the primaries, then we may be in for a rough ride. I'm not sure that all the new people will turn out for the primaries. The new energized base of Bernie Sanders will turn out for the general election if Bernie gets the nomination, but I think a lot of them may not turn out for the primary elections, if history is any indication. So how are we going to thwart these pundits and their corporate masters?
These culture wars have sown division among workers by forging these silly in-groups and out-groups based on cultural indicators like whether you drive a big truck or not. This has very effectively divided working-class voters, who otherwise might be working together for better conditions, as they are doing with Bernie Sanders. There just aren't as many of the same kinds of opportunities for building worker solidarity as there were at the beginning of the modern era. Our work is more alienating, our lives more atomized, and these cultural obstacles more deeply ingrained. So how do we battle these huge forces and build real solidarity among workers? The movie Pride is very cute, you should check it out. It's about the true story of a coal miner union joining together with an LGBT rights group in solidarity and helping each other achieve the other's ends. In the movie, the LGBT group went out of their way to raise money for the coal miners union for no other reason than to just build solidarity with them. Even though there were homophobic coal miners and significant cultural differences between the two, and apparently unrelated goals, that one selfless act by the LGBT group built a foundation of trust, which then facilitated time spent together, which grew into mutual fondness, which built the solidarity that allowed both groups to achieve many of their goals. And ultimately, it showed the homophobic miners that gay people are indeed people, changing the culture of the coal miners union in the process. On the same day as Extinction Rebellion's Declaration Day, which was in October 2018, the Yellow Vest movement was born in France. These groups and their battles are always depicted in the media as separate, but they're not. They're the same movement. Today in the US, there's a lot of cultural animosity between coal miners and environmentalists. There doesn't have to be. And the process of building solidarity between them can start with one group reaching out. Imagine it. Greenpeace and DSA's Eco-Socialist Working Group grabbing beers with the teachers union. Where's my beer? Climate Justice Alliance and a firefighters union planting a forest together. There's so many crossovers possible.
I think the most powerful crossover would be truck drivers and teachers. About 76% of truck drivers vote Republican, and it's probably about the same percent of teachers who vote Democrat, if not higher. But these two groups, if they allied, could shut down the whole country instantly. And they do have a lot in common. I'm both a teacher and a truck driver, so I think it's interesting to wonder what would happen if we could put the two groups together in the way he's describing.
If the left continues to focus mostly or entirely on large-scale analyses, without really considering the individual, continues to put most of its attention on organizing around conferences and working groups and meetings, continues to build siloed movements all disconnected from one another, then it will continue to take solidarity for granted. And if we fail to build strong and broad solidarity, we'll lose all of our battles. Not just to our own peril, but to everybody's.
It is your sacred task to seek this grail.
So it comes back to Bernie Sanders and his question. Who are you willing to fight for?
We're bringing our people together, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight. Our people are coming together for justice and dignity.
To achieve all of those goals, we could unite around the idea of Bernie or bust. The idea that we will never, under any circumstances, continue to prop up the oligarchy through Democratic or Republican parties. We need to keep thinking in terms of unity. We need to work together to figure out how to make sure Bernie gets the nomination this time against the rigging of the pundits and the DNC insiders. So the answer is Bernie or bust. Enough is enough. Go to BernieOrBust2020.us. That's BernieOrBust2020.us. BernieOrBust2020.us to sign the Bernie or Bust pledge. Share it with your friends and neighbors and tell them if you really want to circumvent the system, if you want to unrig it, that's the way to do it. Let's keep Chris Matthews, Rahm Emanuel, and the other pundit class people and the other third way people like John Cowan and Neera Tanden of Center for American Progress and on, David Brock, all of the attack dogs for the Clinton machine and the Obama world. Let's keep them all losing their shit over our solidarity. If we stick together, Bernie or bust, enough is enough. And if we get the word out and we get everybody to Milwaukee to protest if necessary, if everything goes the way it ought to go in the world, we can write music, we can publish books, we can publish articles, we can do the mythology ourselves. We can make this world into a new world if we work together and achieve the kind of solidarity that is described in the current affairs clip here. It heartens me to see assholes like Chris Matthews losing their shit and freaking out. I want to keep this going. We need to keep going on Twitter and on social media. We need to keep pushing back. We'll know we're on the right track when the pundits and politicians are complaining and whining. Then we'll know we're doing it right. And right now, I think we're on the right track. Enough is enough. We're Bernie or bust.
Get on board the Bernie or bust train. Get on board the Bernie or bust train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board the Bernie or bust train.
The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.